Montana Territory stretched endless under a blood-red sky, the kind of red that old men remember when they close their eyes at night. The mountains stood like ancient sentinels keeping watch over secrets buried deep in the soil, secrets written in gunpowder and gold. In the summer of 1968, an old man sat on a porch that had weathered 40 Montana winters. Caleb Brennan was 96 years old, his hands gnarled like the roots of the cottonwood trees that lined the creek behind his property. Those hands had built fences, delivered calves, and held dying men. They had also pulled a trigger 17 times in defense of people who could not defend themselves. His grandson James stood before him in a fresh Army uniform, the green fabric still stiff with newness. 18 years old, the same age boys had been when they died in trenches on beaches in rice paddies half a world away. Tomorrow James would board a plane for Vietnam. Tonight he wanted answers his father could not give. "Grandpa Caleb," the boy said, his voice carrying that tremor young men get when they are trying to sound brave. "I'm scared. What if I don't come back from Vietnam?" Caleb studied the boy with eyes that had seen too much. He saw himself in that young face, saw the same green eyes that marked all Brennan men, saw the same desperate need to understand violence before violence found him. "Fear's natural, boy," Caleb said, his voice like gravel rolling down a hillside. "Question is what you do with it. Dad said you were a hero in the old days, but you never talk about it." Caleb looked past his grandson toward the mountains. 76 years and they had not changed. The same peaks, the same shadows, cutting across the valleys at sunset. Only the men changed. Only the men died. "Heroes are just men who had no choice," Caleb said. "And I had plenty of choices, most of them bad." James shifted his weight the way young men do when they are working up courage. "Tell me, please. I need to know how you faced it. The killing, the fear." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood his joints protesting and walked into his house. When he returned, he carried a rifle. Winchester Model 1873. The wood worn smooth by decades of handling the metal dark with age and oil. He had not fired it in 40 years, but he still cleaned it every Sunday after church. "This rifle," Caleb said, running his thumb along the barrel, "was with me through every fight. Summer of 1892, I killed 8 men defending Dust Creek from a corporation that thought money bought the right to murder. Over the next 33 years as sheriff, I killed 9 more. 17 men total. Every one of them I remember. Their faces, their last ones. You ready to hear that kind of story?" James nodded. "Then let me tell you about the year I turned 20. The year I learned being a man means more than pulling a trigger. It means knowing when not to pull it." Caleb settled back into his chair. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. He closed his eyes and the years fell away like leaves from an autumn tree. Montana Territory, June 1892. The cabin sat in a clearing 10 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by pine forests so thick a man could disappear into it and never be found. Caleb Brennan woke before dawn as he had every morning for 5 years. He was 20 years old, but his eyes belonged to someone much older. The routine never changed. Check the traps first. 3 beaver from the creek, 1 red fox caught in the snare near the ridgeline. Caleb skinned them with quick, precise movements, his knife following the natural seams in the hide. Waste nothing. His father had taught him that. Waste nothing, trust no one, and always know your way out. Back at the cabin, he cleaned his weapons. The Winchester 1873 came first, the lever-action rifle his father had given him on his 15th birthday. 15 rounds in this magazine, one in the chamber, if you were expecting trouble. Caleb broke it down with practiced ease, running an oiled cloth through the barrel, checking the action, making sure the firing pin moved freely. In Montana Territory, a jammed rifle meant death. The Colt Peacemaker came next, the .45 caliber revolver riding in a holster on his right hip. 6 rounds, but Caleb kept the hammer resting on an empty chamber. 5 shots. In his entire life, he had never needed more than 3. When the weapons were clean, he stepped outside to practice. Tin cans lined up on a fallen log at 100 yards. Caleb raised the Winchester, sighted down the barrel, and fired. The first can jumped into the air. He worked the lever, the brass casing, spinning away into the grass, and fired again. 5 shots, 5 cans dancing in the morning light. He lowered the rifle and listened. Birds singing, wind in the pines, no human sounds. Good. The cabin itself was small but well-built, every log chinked tight against the Montana winters. Inside, everything had its place. Bedroll in the corner, cook pot hanging from an iron hook, shelves lined with provisions, flour beans, coffee ammunition. On the wall, a map of the territory within 50 miles marked with trails only Caleb knew. Escape routes, hiding places, the kind of knowledge that kept a man alive when other men wanted him dead. But it was the item on the small shelf above his bed that Caleb avoided looking at most mornings. His father's sheriff badge, dusty and tarnished, a five-pointed star that had once meant something. Now it was just metal and memories. This morning the badge caught the light from the window and Caleb made the mistake of looking directly at it. The memories came rushing back the way they always did, sharp and painful like a knife blade between the ribs. Montana Territory 5 years earlier. Caleb was 15 years old, hiding in an alley off Main Street in Dust Creek. His father, Sheriff Daniel Brennan, stood in the middle of the street facing down 5 armed men. The leader was Silas Kane, a tall man with cold eyes and a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. "This is legal land, Kane," Daniel Brennan said, his voice carrying that particular authority good lawmen have. "You got no right to it." "Blackwell Corporation has every right," Kane replied. "We bought the mineral claims. From men you coerced. I got testimonies. Witnesses. Soon as the territorial judge arrives, you and your bosses are done." Kane smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Witnesses can disappear, Sheriff." "Not while I'm wearing this badge." The shot came without warning. Kane drew and fired in one smooth motion, the kind of draw that came from killing many men and feeling nothing about it. The bullet took Daniel Brennan in the chest, spinning him around. He fell face down in the dust. Young Caleb ran from the alley screaming, dropping to his knees beside his father. Blood spread across the dirt, dark and spreading fast. Daniel's eyes found his son's face. "Caleb," he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. "Your brother. Hide Tucker. Don't let Kane find him. Promise me." "Pa, hold on. Doc's coming. Just hold on." But Daniel Brandon's eyes were already glazing over, looking past his son toward a sky he would never see again. His last breath came out as a sigh, and he was gone. Kane stood over them, looking down at the 15-year-old boy cradling his dead father. "You're next, boy," Kane said, "soon as you're old enough to be a threat." Then Kane and his men rode out of town, and no one lifted a hand to stop them. No one ever did when Blackwell Corporation gave the orders. Caleb buried his father on a hillside overlooking Dust Creek. He did not cry at the funeral. He had cried all his tears the night before alone in the darkness. At the graveside, he made 2 promises. First, that he would never wear a badge. Badges attracted bullets, and bullets made orphans. Second, that he would keep his younger brother safe no matter the cost. Tucker Brennan was 11 years old when their father died, a quiet boy with their father's green eyes and their mother's gentle nature. Mary Brennan had died 5 years earlier, bringing Tucker into the world, her body giving out after 3 days of labor. Daniel Brennan had been left with 2 sons and a broken heart, trying to be both lawman and father until Kane's bullet ended the attempt. The night after the funeral, Caleb took Tucker by the hand and led him through the darkness to St. Mercy's orphanage on the hill above Dust Creek. Sister Margaret Hartley answered his knock, a sturdy woman of 37, with kind eyes and capable hands. "Please," Caleb said, his voice breaking, "take him. Keep him safe. Don't tell anyone his family name. Just call him Tucker." Tucker looked up at his older brother, confusion and fear warring in his young face. "Caleb, what are you doing, keeping you alive?" Caleb knelt down to Tucker's eye level and, "Listen to me. Men who kill sheriffs don't leave witnesses. If they know you're a Brennan, they'll kill you too. You have to hide here. Pretend you're just another orphan. Can you do that for me?" "I don't want to hide. I want to stay with you." "I know, but this is how I protect you." Caleb pulled his brother into a fierce embrace. "I'll watch over you. I promise you won't see me, but I'll be there. When can I come home?" Caleb had no answer for that. He touched Tucker's face one last time, memorizing every feature, then stood and looked at Sister Margaret. "He's all I got left," Caleb said. Sister Margaret took Tucker's hand. "What will you do? Disappear? Live in the mountains? Stay away from people? Stay alive long enough to make sure Tucker grows up safe? And then, Caleb had no answer for that either. He turned and walked into the darkness, not looking back, because if he did, he would not have the strength to leave. For 5 years, Caleb lived alone in the mountains. He trapped and hunted, selling pelts in small towns where no one knew his name. Once a month, he would watch St. Mercy's from a distance using a spyglass his father had owned. He watched Tucker grow from child to young man, watched him learn to chop wood to help with the younger orphans, to become someone Caleb could be proud of from afar. Now at 20, Caleb stood in his cabin, looking at his father's badge, and wondered if 5 years had been enough. Wondered if Cain had forgotten. Wondered if the debt of blood could ever be considered paid. The knock on his door shattered the morning silence. Caleb grabbed the Winchester in one smooth motion, levering around into the chamber as he moved to the side of the door. No one visited this cabin. No one knew it existed except one man. "Still jumpy, I see," came a familiar voice. Caleb lowered the rifle and opened the door. Jonas Whitmore stood on the porch, a grizzled man of 55 who had taught Caleb everything his father had not lived long enough to teach. Tracking, shooting, surviving. Jonas had been an Army scout before the bottle caught up with him. Now he lived even deeper in the mountains than Caleb, avoiding civilization and the memories it carried. "What do you want, Jonas?" Caleb asked. "Trouble in Dust Creek. Corporate men asking questions about Daniel Brennan's family." Caleb's blood ran cold. "I ain't got family. Your brother exists whether you claim him or not. Far as anyone knows, Tucker's just another orphan." Jonas stepped inside without invitation the way old friends do. He poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove, his movements slow and deliberate. Cain's back, with 40 men, Blackwell corporations making their move on the territory. How long's he been there? Week, maybe 2, setting up like he means to stay. Caleb walked to the window looking out at the mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks was Dust Creek. Somewhere in that town was Tucker, 16 years old now, with their father's green eyes and no idea that his older brother watched him from the shadows. "What's Cain want?" Caleb asked, though he already knew the answer. "Same thing Blackwell always wants. Land, minerals, money. They're buying up claims, running folks off their property. Anyone who resists well." Jonas drank his coffee. "Accidents happen. Sheriff can't stop them. Ain't got a real sheriff. Just Deputy Marcus Hayes, and that boy's dumber than a box of rocks. Some folks think he's on Blackwell's payroll, but can't prove it." Caleb turned from the window. "Why tell me this?" "Because Cain's been asking about Daniel Brennan, asking if the sheriff had family, asking if anyone knows what happened to his sons." The plural made Caleb's hands tighten on the Winchester. "He don't know about Tucker." "Not yet, but he's looking. And when men like Cain start looking, they generally find what they're after." For a long moment, the two men stood in silence. Outside, a jay called from the pines. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked under the weight of a deer or elk. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds, the kind of sounds that disappear when war comes to the mountains. "I appreciate the warning," Caleb said finally, "but I made a choice 5 years ago. I ain't going back. Even if it means Tucker dies. Tucker's safe at the orphanage. Cain's got no reason to look there." Jonas set down his coffee cup. "Boy, I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Watched your pa teach you to shoot, to track, to think. Daniel Brennan was one of the best lawmen Montana Territory ever had, and he raised you to be the same. But you got one problem he never had." "What's that?" "You think hiding is the same as protecting. It ain't. Sometimes protecting means standing up. Sometimes it means fighting. Fighting gets people killed. So does hiding if you hide long enough." After Jonas left, Caleb tried to return to his routine, but his hands were shaking too badly to skin the fox. He sat on his porch, the Winchester across his knees, and thought about his father. Daniel Brennan had been a good man in a hard land. Fair, honest, brave enough to stand alone when standing alone meant dying. He had worn that badge knowing what it might cost, and in the end, it had cost him everything. Caleb had sworn never to follow that path. But now, sitting in the morning sun with the mountains around him and his brother in danger 10 miles away, he wondered if there were some debts that could not be paid by hiding. By noon, he had made his decision. He would ride to Dust Creek, scout the situation, then return to his cabin. Just reconnaissance. Just information. He would not get involved. He would not put on a badge. He would not become his father. He saddled his horse, a tough mountain Mustang he had named Smoke for her gray coat. Into his saddlebags went ammunition, jerky, a canteen. The Winchester went into the saddle scabbard. The Colt rode on his hip. He looked like what he was, a young man expecting trouble. The ride to Dust Creek took 3 hours through country Caleb knew better than his own reflection. He followed game trails invisible to anyone who had not spent years learning them, moving through pine forest and across meadows where wildflowers bloomed in explosions of color. Montana Territory in June was beautiful enough to break your heart, beautiful enough to make you forget that beauty and violence often shared the same ground. He approached the town from the east, staying in the tree line, using the spyglass to study the streets before committing himself to the open. What he saw made his jaw tighten. Dust Creek had changed in 5 years. The buildings were the same, the layout familiar, but there was a wrongness to it now, a tension hanging in the air like smoke. Armed men stood on street corners, their postures relaxed but their eyes watchful. They wore no uniforms, but they all carried new Winchester repeaters and had that particular hardness that came from being paid to hurt people. On the hill above town, St. Mercy's orphanage looked the same as it had in Caleb's spyglass observations. The building was old but solid, built from logs that would last another century. Children played in the yard under the supervision of Sister Margaret, who had aged into her early 40s but still moved with that brisk efficiency frontier women needed to survive. And there, carrying firewood from the shed to the main building, was Tucker. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Through the spyglass, he could see details that distance had always denied him. Tucker was tall for 16, lean, and strong from physical labor. He had their father's build, their father's way of moving. And when he turned his head to call something to one of the younger children, Caleb saw those Brennan green eyes, bright and clear even at this distance. For 5 years, Caleb had watched his brother grow from afar. Now, for the first time, he was close enough to really see him, close enough to understand what he had sacrificed, close enough to feel the weight of all those lost years pressing down on his chest. A commotion in the street below pulled Caleb's attention away from the orphanage. A woman was coming out of the general store, her arms full of packages. Sister Margaret. Caleb recognized her immediately, though the years had weathered her face and added silver to her hair. 2 of the armed men stepped into her path. Even at this distance, Caleb could read the body language. The men were not letting her pass. Sister Margaret tried to step around them, but they moved to block her again. One of them said something that made his companion laugh. Sister Margaret's face remained calm, but Caleb saw her grip tighten on her packages. Then one of the men reached out and grabbed her arm. Caleb was moving before he realized he had made the decision. He urged Smoke down the hillside, keeping to cover as long as possible, then emerged onto Main Street at a trot. The armed men saw him coming and straightened their hands, moving toward their weapons. Caleb kept his hands visible and his face neutral, but he angled his approach to put himself between Sister Margaret and the men who had grabbed her. "Sister," he said, tipping his hat, "saw you were having trouble with your packages. Let me help." Sister Margaret's eyes met his, and Caleb saw the recognition there. 5 years, but she remembered the desperate 15-year-old boy who had brought her Tucker in the night. Her expression did not change, but he saw the slight nod she gave him. "Mr. Brennan," she said carefully, using his family name for the first time in 5 years. "How kind of you." One of the armed men stepped forward. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of swagger that came from carrying a gun and never being challenged. "We was just having a conversation with the sister here. Nothing that concerns you, Drifter." Caleb met his eyes without blinking. "Looked to me like the conversation was over. Our sister's got packages to carry. I'm offering to help." "That a problem?" The young man's hand moved closer to his gun. "Might be. Then you better decide quick if it's a problem worth dying for." The words were quiet, almost conversational, but they carried a weight that made the young man hesitate. Caleb had not moved his hands toward his own weapons, had not changed his expression, but something in his eyes, something in the way he stood made the armed man reconsider. He looked past Caleb toward the other end of the street, and his face went pale. Caleb risked a glance over his shoulder. A man stood in front of the saloon watching the confrontation. Even after 5 years, Caleb recognized him. Silas Kane had aged into his mid-40s, his hair graying at the temples, the scar on his face deeper and more pronounced. But the eyes were the same, cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who had killed Daniel Brennan and slept soundly that night. Kane stared at Caleb for a long moment, and Caleb felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. Did Kane recognize him? 5 years could change a boy into a man, could add muscle and height, and the kind of hardness that came from living alone in the wilderness. But the eyes, the Brennan green eyes. Then Kane turned and walked into the saloon, dismissing the scene as beneath his notice. The young armed man stepped back, releasing Sister Margaret's arm. "Enjoy your packages, sister. Town ain't safe for women alone after dark." It was not an apology. It was a threat. Sister Margaret gathered her packages with dignity and walked away. Caleb followed, keeping himself between her and the armed men until they reached the edge of town. Only then did she speak. "You shouldn't have come back," she said quietly. "Heard there was trouble." "There is. Blackwell Corporation owns half the territory now. Kane runs their operation. Anyone who resists ends up dead or driven out. And Tucker," Sister Margaret's face softened. "He's well, strong, smart, good with the younger children. He has your father's sense of justice, though he doesn't know where it comes from." "Does he know about me?" "He knows Sheriff Brennan had 2 sons. The older one disappeared after the father died. He doesn't know the one who disappeared watches over him." They had reached the base of the hill leading to St. Mercy's. Caleb could see the orphanage above them, could see children playing in the yard. Somewhere up there was Tucker going about his day, unaware that his brother stood a quarter-mile away. "Sister," Caleb said, "if Kane learns Tucker's a Brennan, what happens?" Sister Margaret met his eyes. "Then God help us all." That evening, Caleb made camp in a clearing 3 miles from Dust Creek, close enough to watch, but far enough to remain hidden. He built no fire-chewed jerky for dinner and watched the sun set behind the mountains. When full dark came, he pulled out the spyglass and studied the town by lamplight. Kane's men were everywhere. Caleb counted at least 30 of them, possibly more. They moved with military precision, rotating guard positions, maintaining sight lines. This was not a gang of outlaws. This was an organized force. Near midnight, movement caught his eye. A rider approaching the town from the south, pushing his horse hard. The man went straight to the largest building on Main Street, a 2-story structure that had been converted into Kane's headquarters. Minutes later, lamps blazed in the upper windows. Something had happened. Something important enough to wake Kane in the middle of the night. Caleb waited watching. An hour passed, then Kane emerged, followed by 6 of his men. They mounted horses and rode north at a gallop, their urgency clear even at this distance. Caleb felt ice settle in his stomach. North meant only one thing: St. Mercy's orphanage. He was moving before conscious thought caught up with instinct. Smoke sensed his urgency and responded, her hooves finding purchase on the dark trail with the sure-footedness of a mountain-bred horse. Caleb pushed her harder than he should have, knowing he was risking a broken leg in the darkness, but the alternative was unthinkable. He reached the orphanage just as Kane's men were dismounting in the yard. Caleb slid from Smoke's back and moved through the shadows, the Winchester in his hands, his thumb on the hammer. Through the windows, he could see Sister Margaret speaking with Kane, her body between him and the children's sleeping quarters. Caleb edged closer, staying in the tree line, trying to hear. Kane's voice carried through the night air. "I'm looking for someone, sister. 2 someones, actually. Tucker and Sarah. Need them to come with me. Just some questions about their families." "These children have no families," Sister Margaret said, her voice steady despite the armed men surrounding her. "That's why they're here." "Now, sister, don't make this harder than it needs to be. See, I got information that Sheriff Brennan had 2 sons. The older one disappeared. The younger one would be about 16 now, same age as your boy Tucker." Sister Margaret's face went pale, but her voice remained calm. "Many children are 16. That proves nothing." Kane smiled. "Maybe not, but I also heard Daniel Brennan's wife died in childbirth. Year was 1881. And funny thing, sister, you got a boy here named Tucker arrived at this orphanage in 1887, right after the good sheriff died. Quite the coincidence." "Coincidences happen." "Not to me, they don't." Kane gestured to his men. "Search the building, find Tucker and bring him to me, and grab that girl Sarah while you're at it. Insurance, why are you?" Sister Margaret moved to block the door. Kane's hand came up fast, the back of it catching her across the face. She felt hard blood streaming from her split lip. The children inside began screaming. Caleb had the Winchester to his shoulder before Sister Margaret hit the ground. His finger found the trigger. Through the sights he could see, Cain's head could see the point where the bullet would enter just below the ear. One shot, one pull of the trigger. Justice for his father, protection for his brother. But pulling that trigger would announce his presence, would tell Cain that Caleb Brennan was alive, would put a target on every person in that orphanage because Cain would burn it to the ground rather than let witnesses survive. Caleb lowered the rifle, his hands shaking with rage and frustration. Cain's men emerged from the orphanage dragging Tucker and a girl of about 12. Tucker was fighting, landing a solid punch on one guard's jaw before another hit him in the stomach. The girl Sarah was screaming, calling for Sister Margaret. "Easy now," Cain said, his voice almost gentle. "No one needs to get hurt. We're just going to have a conversation. Find out who you really are, boy. Then maybe you can go back to your nice warm bed." Tucker's green eyes blazed with defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about. My name's just Tucker. That's all I ever been." Cain studied him, then smiled. "Those eyes, Brennan eyes. Your brother has them too. Or had them. Might be he's dead by now. Might be he's watching from somewhere in the dark, wondering if he should save you or run like he's been running for 5 years." The words hit Caleb like physical blows. Cain knew. Somehow, Cain knew everything. Tucker and Sarah were thrown onto horses, their hands tied. Cain mounted his own horse, then paused, looking directly at the tree line where Caleb hid. "Caleb Brennan," Cain called into the darkness. "I know you're out there. Know you've been watching. Here's how this works. You got until noon tomorrow to turn yourself in. Come to my headquarters alone, unarmed. You do that, I let the kids go. You don't, well." He shrugged. Bodies are easy to hide in Montana territory. Then Cain and his men rode away, taking Tucker and Sarah into the night. Sister Margaret pulled herself to her feet, blood still streaming from her lip. She looked toward the tree line, though she could not possibly see Caleb in the shadows. "God forgive me," she whispered. "God forgive us all." Caleb stood frozen, the Winchester heavy in his hands. For 5 years he had hidden. For 5 years he had told himself that staying away was the same as keeping Tucker safe. Now his brother was in the hands of the man who had killed their father, and hiding was no longer an option. He emerged from the trees. Sister Margaret saw him coming and sank to her knees, whether in relief or despair, Caleb could not tell. He helped her to his feet, gentle despite the urgency screaming through his veins. "How bad are you hurt?" he asked. "I'll live. Caleb, I'm so sorry. I should have sent him away years ago, should have hidden him better." "This ain't your fault. It's mine. I thought hiding was enough. Thought if I stayed away, Cain would never look too close." He turned toward the mountains, toward the direction Cain had ridden. "I was wrong." "What will you do?" Caleb checked his weapons. Winchester fully loaded, Colt loaded, pockets full of ammunition. Not enough to fight 40 men, but enough to make a point. "What my father would have done," he said. "Stand up, even if it means dying." "Caleb, you can't face Cain alone. He'll kill you." "Maybe, but Tucker lives. That's what matters." He started toward smoke, but Sister Margaret grabbed his arm. "Wait, there's someone you need to talk to first, someone who might help." "Who?" "Jonas Whitmore came by yesterday. Said if trouble started to find him at the old Miller place 2 miles north. Said he owed your father a debt." Caleb knew the Miller place, an abandoned homestead that had been empty for years. "Jonas can't fight 40 men any more than I can." "No, but he knows people. Men who remember your father. Men who might stand with you." "I ain't asking anyone else to die." "You won't have to ask. Your father saved this town more times than anyone can count. People remember. Let them help." Caleb wanted to refuse, wanted to ride straight to Cain's headquarters and end this with bullets and blood. But Sister Margaret was right. Riding in alone meant dying alone, and dying meant abandoning Tucker to whatever fate Cain had planned. 2 hours, he said. "I'll give Jonas 2 hours to find help. After that, I'm going in with or without backup." The ride to the Miller place took 20 minutes of hard riding. Caleb found Jonas waiting in the ruins of the barn, a lantern burning at his feet. The old scout looked up as Caleb approached, and his face was grim. "Heard the commotion," Jonas said. "Cain took the kids. He knows Tucker's my brother. Don't know how, but he knows." "What are you planning?" "Trade. Me for them." Jonas spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Cain will kill you all. You Tucker, the girl, can't afford witnesses? Then what do you suggest? We get them back before Cain can kill them? Hit his camp tonight. Fast, quiet, get the kids out before his men know what's happening. That's suicide. Maybe, but it's less suicidal than walking into a trap tomorrow. Caleb studied the older man. Jonas had taught him to survive in the mountains, had taught him to track and shoot and think like a predator. But this was different. This was not hunting elk. This was war. You'd do this, Caleb asked. Risk your life for kids you barely know. I'd do it for Daniel Brennan's sons. Your pa saved my life twice. Once from Sioux Raiders, once from my own drinking. Figure I owe him at least this much. Even if we both die, Jonas smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. Boy, I'm 55 years old, lived longer than I got any right to. If I'm gonna die, rather, it'd be doing something worthwhile than choking on my own vomit in some mountain shack. A sound made them both turn. 3 men emerged from the darkness leading horses. Caleb recognized them, ranchers who worked land outside Dust Creek. Hard men, all of them, the kind who had fought Indians and outlaws in Montana winters. Heard you might need help, one of them said. His name was Orrin Pike, a man in his 60s who had known Caleb's father. Sister Margaret sent word, said Daniel Brennan's boy was in trouble. 2 more men appeared, then 3 more. Within an hour, 15 men had gathered at the Miller place, all of them armed, all of them grim-faced. They were not soldiers. They were farmers and ranchers and shopkeepers. But they were Montana men, and Montana men did not forgive the murder of a good sheriff. Caleb looked at them, these men who barely knew him, who were willing to risk death for his father's memory. His throat tightened. Cain's got 40 men, he said. Professional guns. We hit his camp tonight, most of us probably die. Then we die, Orrin Pike said simply. Your father stood for us when no one else would. We'll stand for his sons. Jonas spread a map on the ground marking Cain's camp with a piece of charcoal. Guards here, here, and here. Main tent in the center. That's where they'll be keeping the prisoners. How do you know? Caleb asked. Because that's where I'd keep them. Close enough to hear if they try to escape, far enough from the guards that their screams don't keep the men awake. The words sent ice through Caleb's veins. Screams. We hit them at midnight, Jonas continued. 3 groups. Caleb leads the extraction team, goes straight for the prisoners. I take the north side with 5 men, create a distraction. Orrin takes the south with 5 men, cuts off retreat. Rest of you form a perimeter, make sure no one gets away to raise alarm. And if they do raise alarm, one of the ranchers asked, then we fight our way out, or die trying. They spent the next hour preparing, checking weapons, loading cartridges, making peace with whatever gods they believed in. Caleb found himself standing apart, looking at the mountains silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Jonas joined him. You scared, terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it control you. Jonas, if I don't make it out, there's something you need to know. Tucker doesn't know I'm his brother. If I die tonight, tell him. Tell him I was watching all along. Tell him I loved him. Jonas was quiet for a moment. Your pa would be proud of the man you became. Pa's dead because he wore a badge. I swore I'd never follow that path. Sometimes the path finds you whether you want it or not. Jonas put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. Names matter, boy. Legacy matters. Don't let Cain take that from you. At midnight, they moved out. Cain's camp was 3 miles northeast, tucked into a valley where a creek provided water, and the surrounding hills provided protection from wind. Caleb and his team approached from the east, moving on foot through the darkness, leaving their horses a half-mile back. Every sound seemed magnified, the crunch of boots on pine needles, the creak of leather, the rasp of breathing. They reached the perimeter just as the moon rose, painting the world in silver and shadow. Caleb could see the camp spread below them, 30-some tents arranged in military rows, guards posted at regular intervals, campfires burning low. In the center, a larger tent with lantern light glowing through the canvas. Caleb counted guards. 6 visible, probably more he could not see. The odds were terrible. The plan was insane. But Tucker was down there somewhere, and that made the impossible suddenly simple. Jonas made a sound like an owl, the signal to begin. From the north side of camp, a shot rang out, then another. Shouts. Confusion. Men running toward the sound. Caleb and his team moved. They came down the hillside like ghosts, using the chaos on the north side to cover their approach. Two guards stood near the central tent. Caleb took the first one from 20 yards, the Winchester's crack lost in the general gunfire. Jonas took the second. They reached the tent, and Caleb slashed through the canvas with his knife. Inside, Tucker and Sarah sat back to back, their hands bound with rope. Tucker's eyes went wide when he saw Caleb. "Who are you?" Tucker whispered. Caleb cut his bonds without answering, then freed Sarah. "Can you run?" "Yes." "Then run. North, there's horses waiting. Go." Tucker grabbed Caleb's arm. "Wait, I know you. You're the one who helped Sister Margaret today. Why are you doing this?" Caleb met his brother's eyes, those Brennan green eyes, and felt something break inside his chest. 5 years of distance. 5 years of watching from afar. 5 years of pretending he did not have a family. "Because you deserve better than dying for someone else's greed," Caleb said. "Now go. Please." A shout went up from the hillside of camp. They had been discovered. Gunfire erupted in earnest now, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness. Caleb pushed Tucker and Sarah toward the slash in the tent. "Run." They ran. Caleb followed the Winchester, bucking in his hands, as he fired at shapes in the darkness. He did not aim to kill, just to create fear and confusion. Men scattered seeking cover, not understanding how many attackers they faced or where the shots were coming from. Then a voice cut through the chaos, Kane's voice sharp and commanding. "It's Brennan Caleb. Brennan, $500 to the man who brings him down." The gunfire intensified. Bullets cracked through the air around Caleb's head. He dove behind a water barrel and returned fire, dropping two men who were silhouetted against a campfire. The Winchester ran dry. He dropped it and drew the Colt, the heavy revolver solid in his hand. Jonas appeared beside him, breathing hard. "Kids are away. Time to go." "You go. I'll cover." "Like hell. We go together or not at all." They ran, weaving between tents, vaulting by lines, the camp erupting into full chaos behind them. Men were shooting at shadows, now hitting their own people in the darkness. Caleb heard screams, curses, the wet sound of bullets hitting flesh. They reached the horses and found Tucker and Sarah already mounted. Orrin Pike and his men were there too, their faces grim. 3 of the men who had come down from the Miller place were missing. "Dead?" Jonas asked. "Tom Fletcher took one in the belly. Died before we could get him out. Jim Cobb and Henry Miller went down in the crossfire." Caleb felt the weight of those deaths settle onto his shoulders. 3 men, 3 families who would wake tomorrow to find fathers and husbands gone. 3 graves to dig, all because he had asked for help. "Ride," he said. "Spread out. Meet it at Miller's place in an hour." They scattered into the night, taking different routes, making pursuit difficult. Caleb found himself riding beside Tucker, the younger boy clinging to his horse with the desperation of someone who has never ridden fast through darkness. "Stay low," Caleb called. "Follow the tree line. Your horse knows the way." "Who are you really?" Tucker shouted back. Caleb did not answer. Could not answer. The words stuck in his throat like broken glass. They reached Miller's place, just as dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. 15 men had ridden down from that place to raid Kane's camp. 12 came back. Sister Margaret was waiting, her face pale but determined. She had brought medical supplies and began tending to wounds, bullet grazes, cuts, bruises. Tucker and Sarah sat together near a cold campfire, wrapped in blankets, still shaking from fear and adrenaline. Caleb stood apart, reloading his weapons, avoiding everyone's eyes. Jonas approached him. "You did good, boy. 3 men died. 3 men chose to fight. That's on them, not you. They fought for me, for my family name. Name I've been hiding from for 5 years." Jonas studied him. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding." Before Caleb could respond, the sound of hoofbeats made everyone grab weapons. A rider appeared, pushing his horse hard. Deputy Marcus Hayes, his face flushed, his eyes wild. "Kane's coming," Marcus shouted as he reined in. "Whole damn force. 40 men, maybe more. They'll be here in minutes." "Why warn us?" Jonas asked, his rifle trained on the deputy. Marcus dismounted, his hands trembling. "Because I need to tell you something. Something I should have said 5 years ago." He looked at Caleb. "I was there when your pa died. I saw Kane shoot him, and I did nothing. Just stood there and watched a good man die." The clearing went silent. "Kane paid me," Marcus continued, his voice breaking, $50. Said it was to keep quiet, but it was blood money. I've been his creature ever since, feeding him information looking the other way. My father was a lawman who died poor, and I swore I'd never be poor. So I sold my soul. He looked at the assembled men. But watching you people stand up, risk everything for each other, made me remember why my father wore that badge. So I'm here. Probably too late, but I'm here. The sound of many horses reached them. Cain and his men, coming fast, coming angry. Caleb looked at the people gathered at Miller's place. Tucker and Sarah still children. Sister Margaret, who had protected Tucker for 5 years. Jonas and Orrin and the other survivors' men who had risked everything for his father's memory. They could not fight 40 professional guns. They could not win. But they could buy time. Tucker, Caleb said. There's a trail northeast from here. Follows the creek, then cuts up through the pines. You take Sarah and Sister Margaret and you ride. Don't stop until you reach Fort Benson. Tell them what happened here. Tell them Blackwell Corporation's got a private army and they're murdering Montana citizens. What about you? Tucker asked. We'll hold them here. Give you time to get away. No, I'm staying. I can fight. Caleb crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and grabbed Tucker by the shoulders. For the first time in 5 years, he looked his brother directly in the eyes. You're going because you're worth more than this fight. You're worth more than revenge. You understand. Who are you to tell me what I'm worth? Caleb opened his mouth and the truth came spilling out before he could stop it. I'm your brother. The words hung in the air between them. Tucker's eyes went wide, searching Caleb's face, seeing the same green eyes, the same sharp jaw, the same way of standing. Seeing the truth written in bone and blood. My brother, Tucker whispered. Caleb, is it really you? Yeah, it's me. But they said you died. They said you disappeared after Pa was killed. I didn't die, I hid you. Put you in that orphanage when you were 11. Told Sister Margaret to keep you safe, never tell you your real name. Spent 5 years watching you grow from the mountains. Caleb's voice broke. I'm Caleb Brennan. Daniel Brennan was our father, and I'm asking you as your brother to run. Please. Tucker's face crumpled. 5 years of lies. 5 years of not knowing, all of it, crashing down in this moment. You left me, Tucker said. You left me alone. I kept you alive. You could have done both. You could have stayed. If I stayed, Cain would have found you, would have killed us both. Caleb's shout echoed across the clearing. Pa's last words. He said, hide Tucker. Don't let Cain find him. So I hid you. And I hid myself, and every day for 5 years I wanted to come back, but I knew if I did, I'd be leading Cain right to you. Tucker stood, frozen tears streaming down his face. Then Sarah grabbed his hand. We have to go, she said. He's right. We have to go. Sister Margaret took Tucker's other hand. Come, child. Live to fight another day. They led Tucker toward the horses. The boy looking back at Caleb with an expression that held hurt and understanding, and 1,000 questions there was no time to answer. Caleb watched them ride away, taking the northeast trail, disappearing into the pines. Watched until even the sound of hoofbeats faded. Then he turned to face the 12 men still standing with him. 12 men against 40. 12 men who knew they were about to die. Anyone wants to leave, now's the time, Caleb said. No one moved. Jonas checked his rifle. Your pa stood alone more than once. Reckon it's our turn. Deputy Marcus stepped forward. I know I got no right to stand with you, but if you'll have me, I want to make things right. Caleb studied the man who had watched his father die and done nothing. Every instinct screamed to send him away, but he saw genuine remorse in Marcus's eyes, saw the same desperation to atone that Caleb himself felt. You fight with us, Caleb said. You might die. You know that? I know, but at least I'll die trying to be the man my father raised me to be. The first of Cain's men appeared at the edge of the clearing. In 1968, on a porch in Montana, an old man opened his eyes. His grandson James sat before him, the boy's face pale, his hands gripping the Winchester 1873. Did you die, James asked, at Miller's place? Caleb smiled, and it was a sad smile. No, boy, I didn't die that day, but part of me did. The part that thought hiding was the same as living. The part that thought I could run from who I was. What happened? That's a story for tomorrow. Sun's setting. You need to rest before you ship out. James stood reluctantly, then paused. Grandpa, was it worth it? All the fighting, all the death. Caleb looked at the mountains, at the eternal peaks that had witnessed everything. Every man I killed, I carry with me. Their faces never fade. But the people I saved, they got to live. Got to have families, build homes, grow old. So yeah, it was worth it, even when it didn't feel like it. After the boy had gone inside, Caleb sat alone on the porch, the Winchester across his knees. 76 years, and he could still smell the gunpowder. Still hear the screams. Still see Tucker's face when he learned the truth. Tomorrow he would tell James about the siege, about Jonas and Orrin and Marcus Hayes, about the men who stood when standing meant dying, about Tucker coming back with federal marshals, about the long, bloody summer that followed. But tonight he just sat with his memories and his rifle in the mountains that had witnessed everything. 17 men over 33 years, he thought. 17 triggers pulled. 17 faces that never fade. The price of being a shepherd was living long enough to count the wolves. The morning sun broke over Miller's place with a light that seemed wrong, too bright for what was about to happen. Caleb Brennan stood with 12 men who had chosen to stay, watching the dust cloud that marked Kane's approach. 40 riders, maybe more, coming fast and angry after the raid that had freed Tucker and Sarah from their camp. Jonas Whitmore checked his Sharps rifle one more time, the big single-shot weapon heavy in his weathered hands. He had loaded it with a .50-70 cartridge, the kind of round that could drop a buffalo at 300 yards or punch through a man at twice that distance. Beside him, Orrin Pike gripped a Winchester repeater, his knuckles white against the wood. "Could still run," Jonas said quietly. "Horses are ready. We could scatter into the mountains, be gone before Kane gets here." Caleb shook his head. "Tucker needs time to reach Fort Benson. Someone has to buy it for him. Buying time with our lives. You got a better currency." Jonas spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Nope. Just making sure you understand the price." The riders appeared at the edge of the clearing, a line of armed men spreading out to surround Miller's place. They moved with military precision, cutting off escape routes, establishing overlapping fields of fire. These were not cowboys or drifters. These were professional gunsmen who had learned their trade in range wars and mining disputes, places where killing was just another job. Silas Kane rode at the center of the line. In the morning light, Caleb could see the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from some forgotten fight. Kane's eyes swept across the small group of defenders, counting them, measuring them, dismissing them. "Caleb Brennan," Kane called across the clearing. "Been waiting 5 years to have this conversation. You've caused me considerable trouble in one night. 3 of my men dead, 2 wounded, and you took something that belongs to me." "Tucker don't belong to anyone," Caleb shouted back. "That boy is Daniel Brennan's spawn, which makes him a loose end. I don't like loose ends. He's just a kid who never did you any harm." Kane smiled, and it was a terrible smile. "His father did me harm, cost me a promotion, nearly cost me my job with Blackwell. All because Sheriff Brennan wouldn't mind his own business. Now I'm here to finish what I started 5 years ago. Wipe out every last trace of your family." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Caleb felt the weight of them, felt the absolute certainty in Kane's voice. This was not negotiation. This was not a threat meant to frighten. This was a promise, cold and final. "You'll have to go through me first," Caleb said. "That was always the plan." But then Marcus Hayes stepped forward, positioning himself between the two groups. His badge caught the morning light, a piece of tin that suddenly seemed to carry enormous weight. "No," Marcus said, his voice shaking but determined. "Kane, I'm placing you under arrest. For the murder of Sheriff Daniel Brennan, for kidnapping, for extortion, for every crime you and Blackwell have committed in this territory." Kane laughed. "You arrest me, boy. You've been on my payroll for 5 years. You really think anyone will believe you? I got witnesses, 12 men right here who will testify. 12 men who will be dead in 5 minutes. Marcus's hand moved to his pistol. "Then make your move." For a frozen moment, nobody breathed. Then Kane's hand dropped toward his gun. Marcus drew his hand surprisingly fast, the pistol coming up smooth. Kane fired first, but Marcus was already moving, his body twisting. Kane's bullet caught him in the shoulders, spinning him around. But Marcus's shot found its target, hitting Kane square in the chest. Both men went down. No. Caleb was running before he realized he had moved, crossing the open ground to where Marcus lay bleeding. Behind him, Jonas and the others opened fire on Kane's shocked men, buying precious seconds. Marcus looked up at Caleb, blood spreading across his shirt. Did I get him? Caleb looked toward Kane. The corporate gun was on his back, clutching his chest, his men surrounding him. Still alive, but badly wounded. Yeah, Caleb said. You got him? Good. That's good. Marcus coughed and blood bubbled at his lips. Tell my father. Tell him I tried. At the end, I tried to be the lawman he was. He'd be proud. I'm proud. Liar, Marcus said, but he smiled. But thank you for the lie. Marcus Hayes died with that smile on his face, one hand still gripping the pistol that had finally done something right. Kane's men had recovered from their shock now. Without their leader conscious, they were more dangerous, not less. Leaderless men fought with panic and fury, not strategy. Fall back, Caleb shouted, grabbing Marcus's body. To the barn. The defenders scrambled toward the main barn structure, carrying their dead deputy bullets chewing up the ground around them. They made it inside just as Kane's men opened up with concentrated fire. Inside the barn, the 12 remaining defenders took positions at windows and gaps in the walls. Caleb laid Marcus's body gently against the far wall, then moved to a firing position. How many rounds you got? Jonas asked. 30, maybe 40. Same. That's 4 shots per man on the other side if we don't miss. Then we better not miss. The assault came in waves. Kane's men, leaderless but furious, rushed the barn from 3 sides. The defenders made every shot count. Caleb worked the Winchester methodically, not thinking, just firing. Lever aim, squeeze. Lever aim, squeeze. Each shot precise. Each shot finding meat. One of Kane's men fell, clutching his leg. Another went down, hit in the shoulder. Caleb did not aim to kill. Wounding was better. A wounded man screamed, broke morale, required 2 others to carry him to safety. But some shots were fatal. Anyway, war did not care about intentions. They're flanking, Oren shouted from the east wall. Coming around the north side. Jonas moved to cover the gap, his sharps booming like thunder. Can't hold multiple angles. We need more men. But they had no more men. Just 12 defenders against 37 attackers, now that Kane was down and 3 others dead or dying. The barn door exploded inward. 3 of Kane's men rushed through, firing wildly. Caleb dropped the first with a shot to the chest. Jonas took the second with the sharps at point-blank range. The third made it 5 steps before Oren put him down with a headshot. 3 more dead. Caleb's count was at 2, Jonas at 3. The numbers blurred together, faces he would remember later when sleep would not come. This ain't working, someone shouted. They're gonna burn us out. As if summoned by the words, smoke began seeping under the barn door. Kane's men had set fire to the outbuildings, creating a wall of flame. Caleb's mind raced. They could not hold, could not win, could only delay the inevitable and hope Tucker had enough time to reach Fort Benson with his story. Then hoofbeats, many of them, coming fast from the west. Caleb peered through a gap in the wall, expecting to see Kane's reinforcements. Instead, he saw something that made no sense. A group of riders, maybe 15 strong, charging into the clearing. They wore no uniforms, carried mismatched weapons, but they rode hard and fired accurately. At the front was Red Calder, the outlaw whose wanted poster hung in every sheriff's office from here to California. Red's gang hit Kane's men from behind, rifles cracking, pistols barking. Kane's force was caught in a perfect trap. Defenders in front, outlaws behind, nowhere to run. What the hell, Oren breathed. Red Calder fought his way to the barn, his horse dancing sideways as bullets cracked past. He swung down from the saddle and kicked open the barn door, grinning like a maniac. You Caleb Brennan, he shouted over the gunfire. Yeah. Well, come on then, unless you want to die in a burning barn. Why are you helping us? Red's grin widened. Kane promised me $500 to bring you in. I was all set to collect. Then I heard what he did to that orphanage, heard about him threatening kids. Hell, I'm an outlaw, not a monster. Besides, man who fights for his family deserves better than getting shot in the back for bounty money. Kane's men were breaking now, caught between 2 fires, their leader down, their numbers dwindling. Some tried to surrender. Others ran for their horses. Red's men had brought spare mounts. Caleb and the survivors grabbed what gear they could and followed Red out of the barn. The clearing was chaos, smoke, and screaming horses and men crying for mercy or mothers or death. They rode hard, leaving Miller's place burning behind them, leaving 4 more of Kane's men dead on the ground, leaving Marcus Hayes' body in the barn because there was no time to bring it. The ride lasted 2 hours, pushing the horses until they were lathered and blowing. Red led them deep into the mountains, following the trails that only outlaws and game animals knew. Finally, he called a halt in a hidden canyon where a spring fed a small pool. "We're safe here," Red said, swinging down from his horse. "Kane's men won't find this place. And even if they do, they'll think twice about following outlaws into outlaw country." Caleb helped Jonas down from the saddle. The old scout was pale, breathing hard. He had taken a bullet in the side during the fight and blood soaked his shirt. "Jonas, why didn't you say something?" Caleb demanded. "Because we needed to ride." Jonas coughed and blood flecked his lips. Saying something wouldn't have stopped the bleeding. Red gestured to one of his men. "Charlie, get over here." Charlie turned out to be a grizzled man in his 50s who had been a field surgeon in the war. He examined Jonas's wound with gentle hands, then looked at Caleb and shook his head slightly. "Bullet's still in there," Charlie said. "Lodged near the spine. I could try to dig it out, but more likely I'd paralyze him or kill him outright." "What if you don't try?" Caleb asked. "Then he's got maybe a day. Infection will set in. Might go peaceful, might not." Jonas grabbed Caleb's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't matter. We bought the time. Tucker got away. That's what counts. You're not dying because of me, bro. I'm dying because I chose to stand. My choice. My consequences." Jonas coughed again. "Your pa taught you to shoot, to track, to survive. Let me teach you one last thing." "What's that?" "How to let go. How to accept that some fights end with death, and that's okay as long as you fought for the right reasons." He pulled Caleb closer. "You got a brother to protect. A town to save. Can't do that if you're sitting here watching an old drunk die. So go. Finish what we started." "Jonas, I can't just leave you." "You can. You will." Jonas smiled faintly. "Been alone most of my life anyway. Good to go out with friends nearby." Caleb stayed with Jonas as the sun moved across the sky. The old scout talked sometimes rambling stories about his years as an army scout, about tracking Sioux warriors across the plains, about the bottle that had destroyed his career, and the mountains that had saved his life. Other times he just breathed each breath a little shallower than the last. As sunset painted the canyon walls golden red, Jonas stopped breathing. His hands still gripping the Sharps rifle he had carried for 30 years went slack. Caleb closed Jonas's eyes and sat for a long moment not moving, just feeling the weight of another death, another name to add to the list of people who had died because Caleb Brennan existed. Red Calder stood beside him as they buried Jonas on a hillside overlooking the canyon. They marked the grave with a cairn of stones, each man placing one, a small ritual of respect. "He was a good man," Red asked. "The best I knew." "Then he died better than most of us will. That counts for something." Caleb turned to face the outlaw leader. "Why did you really help us? Don't tell me it was just because Kane threatened kids." Red looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "You want the truth? Kane's bad for business. Brings federal law. Brings attention. My gang needs this territory quiet so we can work." He paused. "But also I heard about your pa. How he stood up to corporations, protected small folks. Even outlaws need someone keeping the territory honest. Your pa did that. Figured his son deserved a chance to do the same." Over the next 3 days, Red's gang became unlikely allies. They shared their camp, their food, their knowledge of the territory. More importantly, they shared information. Red had been watching Blackwell's operations for months, planning robberies, tracking patterns. He knew things even local law did not know. "Company spread thin now," Red explained, crouched over a map drawn in the dirt. "Lost 8 men at Miller's place. 3 more in your raid last night. Kane's down, might be dying. That leaves maybe 30 men total scattered across 4 locations." "What locations?" Caleb asked. "Main headquarters in Dust Creek. 10 men. Mine operation Canyon Creek. 10 men. Supply depot 5 miles east. 5 men. Patrol rotating between sites. 5 men. How do you know all this?" Red grinned. "Because I've been planning to rob them for 2 months. Know their schedules, their weaknesses, their blind spots. What stopped you? Numbers. Too many guns even for us. But now, Red looked at Caleb. Now you got a personal stake, and I got a business stake. Together, maybe we can break Blackwell's hold on this territory. Caleb studied the map, thinking about his father, about how Daniel Brennan had handled corporate threats. Not with overwhelming force, but with strategy. With making the cost too high for continued aggression. Kane's injured, Caleb said slowly. Maybe dying. That means Blackwell's lost their field commander. They'll be scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. That's when we hit them, before they can regroup. Hit them how? Red asked. Everywhere at once. Supply depot, mine, headquarters, coordinate strikes so they can't reinforce each other. Destroy enough infrastructure. Blackwell pulls out because the numbers don't work anymore. One of Red's men, a hard-faced outlaw named Jake, spoke up. That's 3 targets. We'd need to split our forces. We have 27 men now, Caleb said, counting the survivors from Miller's place and Red's gang. 9 men per target. Hit them at night fast and brutal. Get in, destroy what we can get out before they organize defense. Red considered this, then looked at his gang. Boys, what do you say? Want to fight a corporation? The outlaws conferred among themselves. Then Jake nodded. Hell with it. We're in, but we keep anything we steal. Fair enough, Caleb said. They spent the next day planning. Caleb drew on everything Jonas had taught him about military tactics. Hit at night when men are tired. Use terrain for advantage. Create chaos and fear. Make them think you have more men than you do. The first strike would be the supply depot. Lightly guarded full of valuable equipment, and its destruction would cripple Blackwell's ability to supply their other operations. The second strike would be the mine. 30 workers, 10 guards, but the guards rotated shifts in predictable patterns. Sabotage the equipment, collapse some tunnels, make the mine unprofitable. The third strike would be headquarters itself, the most dangerous target, but also the most important. Inside were records, documents, evidence of every illegal thing Blackwell had done. Get those documents to federal authorities, and the entire corporation could be brought down. I'll lead the headquarters raid, Caleb said. That's suicide, Orrin protested. 10 guns in a fortified building. Which is why we need a distraction. Caleb looked at Red. How do you feel about making a lot of noise? Red's grin was feral. Making noise is what I do best. They struck 2 nights later. At the supply depot, 9 men led by Orrin Pike crept through the darkness. The 5 guards never saw them coming. A brief fight, more scuffle than battle, and the guards were tied up and unconscious. Then Orrin's men set charges using mining dynamite. The explosion lit up the night sky, a column of fire visible for miles. Tents burned, wagons burned, 6 months of supplies turned to ash in 20 minutes. At the mine, 9 men led by Jake sabotaged everything they could. Saws damaged, harnesses cut, support timbers weakened. They dumped copper sulfate into Canyon Creek 5 miles upstream, poisoning the water supply. The mine would be closed for months, maybe permanently. At Blackwell headquarters, Caleb led 9 men through the darkness. Red Calder and his remaining gang created a diversion, attacking the front of the building with rifles and shotguns, making Kane's successors think they were under full assault. While gunfire rattled the front entrance, Caleb and his team slipped through the back. They found 2 guards, both focused on the noise out front. Caleb put them down with shots to the legs, wounding, but not killing. His team rushed inside. They found Kane's office on the 2nd floor. The door was locked, but a well-placed kick from one of the ranchers splintered it open. Inside, filing cabinets full of documents, ledgers, maps, evidence. Grab it all, Caleb ordered. His men began stuffing documents into bags. Caleb was searching the desk when he found something that made his blood run cold. A telegram dated 3 days ago. Wald arriving 7 days with 200 men. Stop pacified territory. Stop. Eliminate all resistance. Stop. No witnesses. We got company coming, Caleb said, showing the telegram to his men. 200 soldiers. We need to move. Now. They heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. Kane's men had figured out the back entrance was the real threat. Caleb's team had maybe 30 seconds. Out the windows, Caleb shouted. Go! They smashed through the 2nd-story windows, dropping to the ground, bullets chasing them. One of the ranchers took a hit in the shoulder but kept running. They made it to the horses and rode hard, Red's covering fire, keeping Kane's men pinned down. Behind them, Red's gang set fire to the building. All the evidence they had not stolen would burn. Kane's entire operation turned to smoke and ash. They regrouped at the hidden canyon as dawn broke. Caleb spread the stolen documents on the ground, reading by firelight. What he found was damning: fraudulent land purchases, bribery of territorial officials, murder contracts including the order to kill Daniel Brennan. Everything needed to destroy Blackwell Corporation written in their own hand. "This is it," Caleb said. "This takes them down. But we need to get it to federal authorities before Wald arrives with his army." "Fort Benson," Oren said. "Federal marshal there. Man named Thornton. Known him 20 years. He's honest." "That's 3 days' ride," Caleb said. "Can we make it before Wald gets here?" "Only one way to find out." They rode out within the hour. Caleb, Oren, and 3 others carrying the documents. Red stayed behind with his gang, promising to harass Blackwell's remaining forces, keep them off balance. "This don't make us friends," Red said as they prepared to part. "You're still law, I'm still outlaw." "Understood. But for now, we're on the same side." Red extended his hand. "Hell of a thing, ain't it, outlaws and lawmen fighting together?" "Your pa would have hated it." "Pa was practical. He'd have taken help from the devil himself if it meant protecting people." They shook hands. Then Caleb mounted Smoke and rode toward Fort Benson. The ride took 4 days. 4 days of hard travel, sleeping in shifts, eating in the saddle. They pushed the horses harder than they should have, knowing every hour counted. They reached Fort Benson on the 4th day and were met at the gates by Tucker and Sister Margaret. Tucker's face split into a grin when he saw his brother. "You made it," Tucker said, embracing Caleb. "Sister Margaret didn't think you would." "Had promises to keep." Caleb looked at his brother, really looked at him. "You okay?" "They treat you well here." "They did. Federal Marshal's been asking questions, taking statements. He wants to talk to you." Marshal James Thornton turned out to be a grizzled man of 60 who had spent 30 years bringing law to lawless places. He examined the documents Caleb brought with the careful attention of a man who knew evidence when he saw it. "This is enough," Thornton said. "More than enough. I can get warrants for every Blackwell executive in the territory, maybe further east, too." "There's a problem," Caleb said. "Man named Richard Wald is coming, Blackwell's Western Operations Chief. He's bringing 200 men and artillery. They'll be here in 3 days, maybe less." Thornton's face went grim. 200 professional soldiers. That's not a raid. That's an occupation force. Can you stop them? "With what I got, 10 marshals. Fort Benson has a garrison of 30 cavalry, but they can't move without orders from Territorial Command." Thornton studied the documents again. "But these might change that. I'll send riders today. To the Territorial Governor. To the federal judge in Helena. Get authority to mobilize forces." "Will it be enough?" "I don't know, son. I just don't know." Caleb spent the next 3 days at Fort Benson, giving statements, identifying documents, building the case against Blackwell. Tucker stayed by his side, the 2 brothers finally talking, finally beginning to know each other. "What was I like?" Tucker asked one evening as they sat on the fort's palisade wall watching the sunset. "When I was little, before Pa died." "Quiet, smart, always watching, always learning. Pa said you had Ma's eyes in his brain. Said you'd be a better man than he ever was." "I don't remember him, just bits, his voice, his hands, the way his badge caught the light. He was the best man I ever knew. Honest, brave. Killed him in the end, but he died knowing he'd done right." Caleb paused. "I ain't him. I ran, hid, spent 5 years in the mountains because I was too scared to face what he faced. You came back. When it mattered, you came back. Only because I had to." "No." Tucker met Caleb's eyes. "You came back because you're a Brennan. And Brennans protect people. That's what Pa did. That's what you do. That's what I want to do." On the 3rd day, riders arrived with news. Richard Wald's force had reached Dust Creek, 200 men just as the telegram had warned. But the riders brought other news too. The territorial governor had mobilized the cavalry, 50 soldiers well armed and trained. And federal judge Harlan Rhodes was en route from Helena with arrest warrants and the authority to disband Blackwell's private army. "It's going to be close," Thornton said. "Wald's already occupying Dust Creek. If he fortifies before the cavalry arrives, we'll have a siege. People will die. Then we don't give him time to fortify, Caleb said. We hit him now, tonight, while his men are tired from the march. With what army? Caleb looked at the assembled forces. 10 federal marshals, 30 cavalry, the survivors from Miller's Place, maybe 50 men total against 200. We don't need an army, Caleb said. We need to make him think twice about staying, show him Montana territory ain't worth the blood. That night, Caleb led a raid that would become legend. 50 men moving through darkness, approaching Dust Creek from 4 directions. They did not attack. They demonstrated. Fires lit on hillsides, making it seem like hundreds of men surrounded the town. Rifle shots from the tree line, precise and terrifying. Not trying to kill, just to unnerve. Wald's men, exhausted from days of marching, found themselves under apparent siege by an invisible force. They fired back, wasting ammunition on shadows. They fortified positions against attacks that never came. They went without sleep, watching darkness that held 1,000 imagined threats. By morning, Wald's force was ragged, terrified, and demoralized. And that's when Judge Rhodes arrived with his federal warrants and the cavalry at his back. "Richard Wald," Rhodes shouted from the horseback, his voice carrying across the town square. "By authority of the United States Federal Court, you are under arrest. Your men are ordered to disarm. Failure to comply will be considered armed resistance against federal authority." Wald stood in the street, his expensive suit dusty from travel, his face showing the strain of a sleepless night under siege. Behind him, 200 men looked to him for orders. "You have no jurisdiction here," Wald said. "Blackwell Corporation has legal rights to this territory." "Had legal rights," Rhodes corrected. "Past tense. As of this morning, Blackwell Corporation's charter in Montana Territory is revoked. Federal investigation into fraud, murder, and extortion is opened. You and your men are trespassing on land you no longer own." Wald looked at the cavalry, at the federal marshals at the hillside still smoking from last night's fires. He was a businessman, not a soldier. He could do math. Even if he won this fight, the cost would be catastrophic. Investors did not reward Pyrrhic victories. "Stand down," Wald ordered his men. "We're leaving." Caleb watched from the hills as Wald's army disarmed and marched away under cavalry escort. Watched as Dust Creek began to breathe again, began to remember what freedom felt like. Tucker rode up beside him. "We won, actually won." "Yeah, for now." "What do you mean for now?" "Blackwell's broken here, but there are other corporations, other Canes, other fights." Caleb touched the badge in his pocket, his father's badge that he had carried through every battle. "Territory needs someone to stand between them and the next threat." "You're thinking of becoming sheriff." "I'm thinking I'm tired of running. Tired of hiding. Pa wore this badge for 18 years. Maybe it's time I try." "You'd stay in Dust Creek." "If they'll have me, and if you'll stand with me." Tucker grinned. "Deputy Brennan, I like the sound of that." They rode down into Dust Creek together, 2 brothers who had been strangers finding their way back to family. Marshal Thornton met them in the town square. "Caleb Brennan, I'm deputizing you as acting sheriff of Dust Creek until the territorial governor makes it official. Pays $40 a month plus housing. You'll need a deputy." Caleb looked at Tucker. "I know just the man." And so began 40 years of law in Dust Creek. Caleb as Sheriff, Tucker as deputy, 2 Brennan brothers doing what their father had done, standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. It was not easy. There were more fights, more deaths, more nights when Caleb woke sweating from dreams of men he had killed. But there were also victories, children who grew up safe, families who prospered, a town that remained free because 2 brothers refused to let it fall. In 1968, on a porch in Montana, old Caleb opened his eyes and looked at his grandson. "That's the middle of the story," he said, "the fighting part. But there's more, the part about what comes after, about living with what you've done." "Did Cain die?" James asked. "Eventually. Took him 3 weeks, but Marcus's bullet found his heart. He died in a bed in Dust Creek under guard, knowing he'd failed." Caleb paused. "I visited him before the end. He asked me if it was worth it. All the killing, all the blood. Told him it was worth it to me because my brother lived. He died believing I was wrong." "Were you going, Mama? I don't know, boy. I just don't know." The years after Blackwell's fall passed in a rhythm that Caleb Brennan had never known before, the rhythm of normal life. Sheriff work was not grand battles and desperate raids. It was settling property disputes and breaking up drunken fights and tracking down cattle thieves who were more unlucky than criminal. Tucker proved to be everything Caleb was not. Where Caleb's instinct was to reach for his gun, Tucker talked. Where Caleb saw threats, Tucker saw people with problems. Together they made Dust Creek safer than it had been in 30 years. But peace in Montana Territory never lasted forever. 6 months after Blackwell's defeat on a cold November morning in 1892, trouble came in the form of a young man with wild eyes and blood on his shirt. "Sheriff Brennan!" the man shouted, half falling from his horse. "Red Calder sent me." "There is trouble." Caleb came out of the office, Tucker right behind him. "What kind of trouble?" "Blackwell men, not the ones the marshals took. Different ones. Fresh guns sent from back east. They hit Red's camp at dawn, killed 3 of his boys. Red's holed up in Copper Canyon with the rest, but they're surrounded. Said to tell you Blackwell ain't done. Said this is revenge." Caleb's blood ran cold. "How many men?" Red counted 20, maybe more. Professional soldiers, not hired guns. Tucker grabbed his rifle from inside the office. "We have to help them. Red's an outlaw. Helping him makes us accessories. He saved our lives multiple times. That's got to count for something." Caleb knew Tucker was right, but the situation was impossible. If he rode out to help Red Calder, he would be aiding a known criminal. If he did not, the men who had fought beside him against Kane would die. He thought about his father, about what Daniel Brennan would do. Then he thought about Jonas Whitmore and Marcus Hayes, men who had died us because they chose to stand for what was right, even when the law said otherwise. "Saddle the horses," Caleb said. "Fast." They assembled a posse in 20 minutes. Orrin Pike still recovering from wounds received at Miller's place. 2 ranchers. The town doctor Samuel Worth, who insisted on coming in case they were wounded. 8 men total riding to save a gang of outlaws. "This ain't strictly legal," Caleb told them. "We're riding to help wanted men. Anyone who comes might face questions." "Then we'll answer them together," Orrin said. "Let's ride." Copper Canyon was a scar in the earth, a narrow defile where a creek had cut through red stone over thousands of years. Red had chosen it as a hideout because it was defensible. But those same high walls that made it safe could become a trap if the entrance was blocked, which was exactly what Blackwell's men had done. Caleb and his posse approached from the south, staying in cover, using the broken terrain to hide their numbers. Through his spyglass, Caleb counted 17 men at the canyon entrance, armed with new repeating rifles and positioned behind makeshift barricades. "How do we get past them?" Tucker whispered. Caleb studied the canyon walls. Steep, but not impossible. A man on foot could climb them given time and courage. But climbing while under fire was suicide. "We don't go past them," Caleb said. "We go over them." He divided the posse. Tucker would lead 4 men in a frontal assault, creating noise and drawing fire. Caleb would take 3 others and climb the canyon wall, attacking from above. "This is crazy," Orrin muttered. "You have a better idea." "Nope, crazy it is." They moved into position. Tucker and his group took cover behind the rocks 200 yards from the canyon entrance. Caleb's climbing team reached the base of the east wall. Caleb fired his Winchester into the air, the signal to begin. Tucker's group opened fire rifles, cracking in steady rhythm. Blackwell's men returned fire, focusing on the threat they could see. Caleb started climbing. The stone was rough under his hands, the surface crumbling in places. Behind him, Orrin and 2 others followed, their breathing harsh. They were halfway up when one of Blackwell's men glanced toward the cliff and saw them. He shouted a warning and began firing. Bullets chipped stone around Caleb's head. "Keep moving," Caleb shouted. "Only way out is up." They scrambled the last 30 feet in a controlled fall and emerged at the canyon rim with scraped hands and bleeding knees. Below, Blackwell's men were repositioning, trying to defend against 2 threats. Caleb brought the Winchester to his shoulder and began firing. From this angle, with high ground and clear sight lines, every shot counted. He worked the lever as fast as his hands could move, not aiming to kill, but to create chaos. Orrin and the others joined in. Suddenly, Blackwell's men were caught in a crossfire. They broke, abandoning their positions and running for their horses. Caleb let them go. He had what he wanted, the canyon entrance open, Red and his men saved. Red Calder emerged from the canyon looking like he had fought a war. His left arm was wrapped in bloody bandages. Two of his men supported a third who was gut-shot and dying. Behind them, three bodies in blankets. "You came," Red said, genuine surprise in his voice. "You asked. I'm an outlaw. You're a lawman. Thought maybe you'd let me hang." Caleb looked at the dying man, at the bodies, at Red's exhausted face. "You're an outlaw who stood with us when standing meant dying. Figure that buys you some loyalty." Red's man Charlie examined Red's arm. "Bullet's still in there, lodged near the bone. Needs surgery, but I can do it if we get somewhere safe." They made camp in the canyon. Charlie worked by firelight, his hands steady despite the crude conditions. Red bit down on a leather strap and endured, his face gray with pain. When it was over, Red looked at Caleb with something close to friendship in his eyes. "We're even now. You saved me, I saved you. Slate's clean. Where will you go?" "Canada, I think. Territory's getting too civilized here. Heard they need good outlaws up north." "Take care of yourself, Red." "You too, Sheriff." Red and his surviving men left 2 weeks later, once Red's arm had healed enough to travel. Caleb watched them ride north toward the border and wondered if he would ever see the outlaw again. Probably not. Men like Red kept moving, always one step ahead of the law. But 3 months later, in February of 1893, new trouble arrived. Harrison Webb, the banker who had helped document Blackwell's crimes, was found dead on his front porch, shot from long-range professional work. Beside the body, carved into the porch railing, was a message: "This is what happens to witnesses. Blackwell remembers." Caleb stood over Harrison's body, feeling cold settle into his bones. The trial was scheduled for April. Harrison had been the key witness, the man who could connect every fraudulent transaction directly to Blackwell executives. "Someone leaked his testimony to Blackwell," Caleb said. "Someone with access to federal documents." "Who?" Tucker asked. "Don't know, but we got a killer in Dust Creek. Professional. Probably been here for weeks waiting for the right moment." The investigation took a week of questioning everyone, looking for strangers' suspicious behavior. They found nothing. Whoever killed Harrison was either gone or hidden too deep to shake loose. Then Sister Margaret brought Caleb a name. "There's a man staying at Orange Saloon," she said. "Calls himself John Smith. Been here 2 weeks. Keeps to himself, watches people. One of the orphans saw him near Harrison's house the morning of the shooting." Caleb and Tucker went to the saloon just after sunset. In the corner, sitting alone with a view of the door, was a tall man in his 40s. Too clean for a drifter. Too calm for someone in an unfamiliar town. "John Smith," Caleb approached, hand resting on his Colt. "Need to ask you some questions about Harrison Webb's murder." The man looked up. Cold eyes. Professional eyes. "I don't know anyone named Harrison Webb." "Then you won't mind coming to the sheriff's office?" "Actually, I mind very much." His hand dropped below the table. Caleb drew and fired in one motion. The bullet took Smith in the shoulder, slamming him back. His pistol clattered to the floor. They dragged him to Dr. Worth's office, then locked him in a cell. For 3 days, Smith said nothing. Then on the 4th day, he spoke. "You're Caleb Brennan." "That's right. The man who destroyed Blackwell's Montana operation, along with a lot of other people." Smith smiled thinly. "Blackwell doesn't forget. They sent me to kill witnesses. Harrison Webb was first. There are 5 more targets. I was supposed to eliminate them all before trial." "Who are the others?" "Why would I tell you? Because I can make your hanging quick or slow. Your choice, Ryan." Smith considered this. "Orrin Pike, Dr. Worth, Sister Margaret. That outlaw Red Calder, though he's probably in Canada by now. And you, Sheriff. They want you dead most of all." What about Tucker?" "Who?" "My brother, my deputy." Smith's eyes widened slightly. "I didn't know Brennan had 2 sons. Files only mentioned you." He laughed. "That's probably why he's still breathing." Over the next 2 weeks, Caleb organized protection for the remaining witnesses. Guards posted around the clock. Witnesses moved into fortified buildings. But he knew it was not enough. Blackwell had money and reach. They would keep sending killers until everyone who knew the truth was dead. Then the second assassin struck. Caleb was making evening rounds when he heard gunfire from St. Mercy's. He ran toward the sound, Tucker and 3 volunteers behind him. What they found was carnage. 2 guards lay dead at the orphanage gate, shot from close range. Inside, Sister Margaret was defending the door with a shotgun, firing at a figure in the darkness. "He came over the wall," she shouted. Caleb caught a glimpse of the assassin darting between buildings. He gave chase, Tucker covering him. The assassin made it to the tree line and spun, bringing up a rifle. Caleb dropped as the bullet cracked past his head. Tucker fired the Winchester's crack sharp in the night. The assassin stumbled but kept running. They pursued into the forest, tracking by sound. Caleb found him collapsed against a tree, clutching his side where Tucker's bullet had found meat. The rifle lay beyond reach. "You got me," the assassin said. "Make it quick." "Who hired you?" "Does it matter? There'll be more." "Always more." Caleb raised the Winchester, sighting down the barrel. One shot, one less killer. One step closer to safety. But Tucker's voice stopped him. "Don't, please. He killed 2 men tonight, tried to kill Sister Margaret." "I know, but if you kill him like this, you become what he is." Caleb's hands shook. He wanted to pull that trigger. But Tucker was right. The line between justice and murder was thin, and crossing it meant losing something that could never be recovered. He lowered the rifle. "Get up. You're under arrest." Marshal Thornton arrived the next day with news that changed everything. "Federal judge is moving the trial to Denver. Too dangerous here. Your witnesses need to travel next week. I'm bringing 20 marshals for security." The convoy assembled on a cold March morning. The remaining witnesses, 20 federal marshals, and Caleb and Tucker as escorts. 8 days of travel to Denver, watching horizons sleeping in shifts. No attack came. Either Blackwell had given up or they were planning something else. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witnesses testified to fraud, murder, extortion. The documents from Kane's headquarters were entered as evidence. Caleb told the story of his father's murder, of Kane's threats, of the war that consumed the territory. Judge Harlan Rhodes presided with an iron fist. When Blackwell's lawyers tried to discredit witnesses, Rhodes shut them down. "This court recognizes the testimony," Rhodes said. "The defense may proceed, but tread carefully." The verdict came in April. Guilty on all counts. Blackwell Corporation was ordered to pay massive restitution, surrender all Montana holdings, and face criminal charges. 3 executives went to prison. The corporation itself was dissolved. In the courtroom, Caleb felt something release in his chest. It was over. Not the consequences, but the immediate threat. Blackwell was broken. Tucker gripped his shoulder. "We did it." "Yeah, we did." They returned to Dust Creek as spring arrived. Life resumed its rhythms. Caleb continued as sheriff, Tucker as deputy. The years passed. In 1898, Tucker married Sarah, the girl who had been kidnapped with him 12 years earlier. They had 3 children, all bearing the Brennan green eyes. Caleb never married. He threw himself into the work, becoming the kind of lawman his father had been. Fair, honest, willing to stand alone when necessary. Over 33 years as sheriff, Caleb killed 9 more men. Range thieves who would not surrender. A bank robber who took hostages. Men who left him no choice. Each time he remembered their faces, added their names to the list that haunted his sleep. But he also saved lives, prevented murders, stopped feuds before they turned bloody, built a town where children could grow up safe. In 1925, at age 53, Caleb retired. His body was worn down by decades of hard work and old wounds. Tucker became sheriff, wearing their father's badge, continuing the work. And in 1968, Caleb sat on a porch watching his grandson prepare for Vietnam. James stood before him in that fresh Army uniform, gripping the Winchester, 1873. "Grandpa, how do you live with it?" "The killing." Caleb looked at the mountains. "You don't live with it. You live alongside it. The faces never fade. But you remember why you pulled the trigger. If the reason was good, if you were protecting someone who needed it, then maybe that's enough." James set down the rifle. "I'm scared. Scared I won't come home. Scared I will, but won't be me anymore." "That's wisdom." Caleb gripped James's shoulder. "You go to Vietnam, you keep your head down, watch out for the man beside you, and come home. Don't try to be a hero. Come home old and boring." James left for Vietnam the next morning. 6 months later, the telegram arrived. "James Brennan killed in action, 1969. Caleb read it 3 times, then walked to the cemetery. He added James's name to the family stone, next to Daniel, next to Jonas, next to all the others who had died too young. Tucker found him there at sunset. "I'm sorry," Tucker said. "I know you love that boy." "I did." Caleb touched the stone. "Thought if I taught him right, he'd come home. But war doesn't care about lessons. They stood together in the fading light, two old men who had served when so many had not. You know what I learned, Caleb said. Being a shepherd means living long enough to count the wolves. All of them, forever. That's the price. And you'd pay it again. Caleb thought about his father, about Jonas and Marcus and Red and all the others, about Tucker and Sarah and the children who grew up safe, about Dust Creek still standing, still free. Yeah, he said, I'd pay it again. In 1975, Caleb Brennan died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. They buried him beside his father on the hill overlooking Dust Creek. His gravestone read Caleb Brennan, 1872 to 1975. Sheriff of Dust Creek, 1892 to 1925. He stood when others ran at the funeral. Tucker spoke about his brother, about the boy who had saved his life by hiding him, about the man who had taught him that protecting people was more important than protecting yourself, about the shepherd who had bared his teeth against wolves and won not through violence, but through refusing to let violence define him. The mourners dispersed. Tucker placed the Winchester on the fresh earth, the rifle that had been with 3 generations of Brennans. You did good, brother, Tucker whispered. Pa would be proud. He walked down the hill as the sun set behind the mountains, leaving the dead to their rest and the living to their memories. Behind him, carved in stone and written in blood, was the legacy of men who had stood when standing cost everything. Men who had learned that being a shepherd sometimes meant becoming a wolf. Men who had counted the cost and paid it anyway because some things were worth more than survival. They were worth living for, worth fighting for, worth dying for. The mountains stood silent witness, as they always had, as they always would, eternal guardians of a land bought with sacrifice and built on the bones of men who refused to run. The story was over. The mountains remained.